There is nothing wrong with your radio.
Do not attempt to adjust the volume.
We are controlling the broadcast.
For the next hour we will control all that you hear.
You are about to experience the knowledge and insights of the Media Mothership.
Alright, hey, you're listening to Media Mothership here on Edge Radio 99.3 FM. I am Dr. Craig, joined by... I've been trying to think of pronouns,
Yes.
titles to afford my two wonderful guests. Let's call them Cinema Maestro, Daniel, and Frankentographer. I'm trying to combine Frankenstein and cinematographer. Frankentographer. So maybe like director,
Yeah.
and Frankenographer. Okay, let's not mess around.
We should try this again, but on Halloween.
Can we edit that out? Or
Yeah, take two. Well, what we're doing is immersing ourselves in today's topic, which is filmmaking. So
Yes.
I have two fantastic filmmakers in today, Daniel and Edward.
Hello.
Hello.
Daniel Brooks and Edward Williams.
Indeed, I am here, you are there, and they are in there.
Yes,
trapped in a tiny little box.
It's amazing how technology works when you're explaining it to cave people, I guess, that kind of box. So we are streaming on Twitch and YouTube potentially. We had, I don't know, man. Like, I came in here an hour before to set up, and I'm going, how much time do I have left? Because nothing was working, and, so feel free to make a chat, I think is how the streamers describe people to do things online. Make a chat. Leave a chat, drop a chat.
And potentially discern whether or not you can actually do that on those platforms.
If you can't, we are also on listening live on Edge Radio. So you can jump on edgeradio.org.au on the website and listen to us on that website and have the YouTube up or the Twitch up at the same time. So you'd be able to get audio through
I have
that.
not done it that way before. I'm going to do that next week.
Or if you've got an FM system, tune into 99.3 FM Hobart. You have to be living in Hobart, though, to pick that one up. And you can listen to us there. So that's part of how you can be engaging with us. On Media Mothership, we explore everything in and around the world of media, mainly how it disrupts, perverts, changes our view of the world around us. We've got two culprits in that are proponents of that manipulation,
yes, of
right?
disrupting things and creating havoc and chaos.
I prefer the term evolution.
One person's freedom is another person's jail. Is that the phrase?
Something like that. But I would like to say that one person's disruption is disruption. And another person's disruption is disruption for somebody else.
True. I
Very
wonder
deep.
if there's a positive term, like one person's
Enrichment.
one person's kind of invention, one person's evolution, as you're saying, a eureka moment. So what we're going to be doing on today's show is unpacking filmmaking. I had the great pleasure, with full disclosure, of being a participant on your latest project.
Oh,
where I got to
was it?
draw. Yeah,
Oh,
it was the
but-
latest project.
Oh, wow.
Maybe you've moved on to another one since then.
Oh, no. We haven't at all. But, no, I do remember. You were indeed there.
So what's so fun about having you guys in is that you're really kind of got that wonderful DIY motivation. And for me, I really wanted to talk about how you guys pull it off every time. And I think it can inspire people to think, if these guys can do it, maybe I can give it a go.
Yes, everyone has a bit of big love in them.
Big love. Yeah.
big love.
And of course, that term grew out of one of the other film projects you were doing. So wonderful.
Originally inspired by a strange person who accosted a classroom that I was in. And,
Yes. So a lot of your work is based on real life experiences. This will be the third or fourth?
a third film, yeah.
Third film
Yeah.
that you're currently in production.
Yes.
Yeah.
And yes, I was brought in to do a small piece drawing upon my own experience, I guess, as a previous lecturer at a number of different universities. And that was a lot of fun. It was great. Before I jump into that, I was thinking I want to, because we were talking about what we're going to chat about. And of course I can debrief about my own experience. But I wanted to, I was thinking about that, about, what my experience was like. And there were 2 film clips I came across, or interviews with other people.
Yes.
So I was going to play just the start of these 2 interviews and then get us to jump in to talk about, the way they're explaining it making sense to us or not.
Ah, yes, that's a good idea.
Right, because the first one, because there were 2 experiences I had on set. One was the mechanics of being on the set with filmmaking. And the other one was kind of the script and story and that term world building.
Yes.
So I want to kind of unpack those 2 ideas through my experience, as well as you guys as the puppet masters.
Puppet master is a bit of a harsh term,
isn't it?
Facilitators.
Yes.
Facilitators of the creativity of other people.
Exactly. Yes. Much more constructive. So this first
through subtle manipulation.
Yeah. Well, and I think much needed guidance, direction, encouragement. Okay, so the first clip is from a YouTube channel called Film Courage. It has a lot of great interviews with cinematographers and so forth and directors. This one is interviewing Aya Friedman, sorry if I mispronounced that, who's an entrepreneur, innovator, cinema technologist. I was thinking those can be applied to you guys as well. Certainly entrepreneur, innovator, and technologist. And what he's doing is talking about his own experience with tech in particular. So, and a lot of this, when I was listening to it, I immediately thought of yourself, Ed. So let's listen to him open up with a really good question, which we'll then dovetail into. So,
what do you love more, cinematography or the gear and tech that brings cinematography to life?
It's such a
So it is such a good question. So her first question is, what do you like more, cinematography or the gear?
Yeah, okay.
We can listen to his answer first. Or Edward, do you want to jump in?
No, let's hear more of it.
Right.
See where it goes.
a great question. I've gone back and forth with that several times through my life because I started off as a cameraman, as a camera assistant, camera operator, and eventually a DP. And I really thought for a long time that that was what I loved and that was what I was most interested in. But I also really loved the technology. And I got to say that at some point, I think I discovered that the technology and what's involved in that is more perpetually interesting to me. Look, I think that all cinematographers are either, well, in order to be a good cinematographer or the best cinematographer, you need to be part artist and part plumber. And if you're too much artist, then and you don't have the technical chops, then you're going to have problems. If you're too much plumber and you're just technical and you don't have artistic chops, there will be problems.
So, plumber and artist.
Right. Well,
I think that's a very apt way of describing it. I would describe myself as not having any plumbing skills. So I guess you've got plumbing skills.
Yeah. Well, it's almost as if you've gone forward in time and interviewed me, and then claimed that this is another person. So,
oh dear.
Well, I think to start off, I started off wanting to be an actor, and I did quite a lot to get into that acting sort of sphere. Unfortunately, I wasn't being cast in anything, not local shorts, nothing. I was gaining no traction. And so I thought, oh, okay, well, if in order for me to get some acting experience, I have to make my own movies. And then I realized that I couldn't actually star in or act in any of the movies that I made because that was just too many roles at a time. So I did settle into filmmaking at a very sort of from the creative point of view. And so my mindset was creative above technical. And then as I got more equipment, as I got more experience, the things that interested me in filmmaking, or the things that I'm starting to become more interested in now, is nonsense like, aperture 2.2.
Yes.
Why would you need an aperture of 2.2? That's ridiculous. You only need 2.8, you know. Yeah, like sort of, and so then that comes into, I've got a budget to work with. I've got this amount of money to spend on gear, and I could spend all this money on this to achieve that, but why would I do that when I don't need that option with that equipment? And so I got into this rabbit hole of just researching equipment and looking at how some microphones cost X amount of money, and the microphones that I was interested in cost a lot less for a tiny fraction of lower quality, you know, the diminishing returns. And this is a roundabout way of saying that I've found myself more interested in researching gear and acquiring gear and seeing what that gear is capable of and exploring the gear. And the actual creative side of it has become somewhat secondary for me. And I believe I can get away with that personally because I have a strong director in the form of Daniel Brooks. Yes. who sort of takes on that more creative role than I do.
I would even say that I've sort of not relieved you of duty, but sort of taken the burden of that onto myself a bit more so that you can care more about tech and equipment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you've also given me the opportunity to actually realize what I get out of it.
So again, that idea of balancing the plumber and the artist kind of drive. They're there in various percentages, but it's interesting to hear sometimes you'll get pulled more into questions of the plumbing.
Yeah.
Other times the art.
Yeah. Now, granted, I did say I was not a plumber at all, but I think there is plumbing involved in organisation, and that is kind of a technical skill.
Yes.
And that's probably the technical skill that I actually do have.
Well, how's the plumbing been on the new film? So what type of admin, tech demands have you found yourself facing this time that have been different?
I think admin's pretty streamlined for this. It's just me and Eiley, our production manager. We talk about props once a week, and then we go and do whatever we're doing. Because I've usually written... I spent a lot of time in pre-production writing documents of information that I just pull from now to act upon, essentially. So it's pretty cruisy.
And you mentioned props. How have the props been coming together at this
pretty
point?
good. Like there's big lists of it, and then you go, actually, it's really not hard to get any of this stuff. Like, you just find it in the houses or in the place that you're filming because it's naturally there. If it is something a bit more complicated, I'll get a graphic designer to make this and we'll stick it on something. Like, we made a series of fake beer bottles with a fake brand.
Right.
Yeah. So for a
So
scene.
you had to get a label
a label made,
printed.
yeah. And we've got a great relationship with a graphic designer who has done a lot for us, like DVD covers and our actual partnership logo.
Yes.
And that was then adapted into the logo for this fake beer brand.
Really? Yeah, is it Big Love?
A Big Love Lager.
Okay, that's fantastic.
When I go home, I have to make more because we have to use some tomorrow. But yeah, so the only time props become a problem is like thinking ahead about, we need this pretty important prop that requires it's a bit more involved. Like, for example, we're filming in March a scene where we need a fake, or at least a phone booth that we can make look kind of old.
Yes.
And obviously you can't just buy a real phone booth for cheap or find one very easily. So you have to make one.
Now, there's a funny story with this
Yes.
that I thought you were aware of because you told me. So they get the prop, right? And they get it in the mail, and you can't take the phone off the receiver.
Oh yeah. So I bought it's a good wall ornament actually. I've left it on my wall, but the piece that we're using as the phone in the phone booth is a little ornament that I bought cheaply, and I just sort of assumed that you'd be able to lift the receiver off. No. Unfortunately, you can't do that. So but instantly I was like, well, whatever. We'll come up with a way to fake it. So essentially, our plan is to have, if someone's looking in the phone booth, you have someone standing in it holding another phone and just and having them hold it so they can pull it in and out of shot.
The magic of cinema.
Mm.
And I, not to say that I'm not creative.
Oh no, that's not
because
true at all.
because my creativity has sort of been more specialized in sort of, I guess, problem solving and how to leverage networks and how to.
Your creativity comes in execution.
Yeah, that too.
As opposed to inception.
Yes. Yeah. And I find that actually coming up with ideas for shots, I think it gets messy if I try to come up with that with those shots. I just have faith that Daniel has an idea of how those shots are going to be edited together, and I perform those shots.
I think Craig, have you ever seen the weird thing about like seeing an apple in your head really clearly or not at all? Have you ever seen this?
Oh, how does that work?
So it's a test for how vivid your sort of visual imagination is. I know a guy at work who cannot see images in his head. Like
so you describe something like an apple.
Yeah, and he can't imagine it visually at all.
Holy hell.
And I think I might be pulling this number out of nowhere, but I think this was the case. I think there's something like 30% of people don't actually see images in their head.
Right.
And I was like blown away by that,
Wow.
because that doesn't make sense to me. Because to me, I was explaining to someone yesterday, to me it's kind of like I've got an extra layer of images going across my vision. So when I'm imagining,
So you're schizophrenic?
oh, maybe, but but when I'm writing, I just see it,
Yes.
like just instantly, and consistently it just repeats over and over in my head when I think about it. So it's as though I've watched it a million different times. So it's really easy for me to concoct lists of how it's supposed to look, without necessarily having to storyboard it, because I know a lot of people would do that and would recommend doing that. But I tried it once and I was like, I don't need to do this. It's all in here, and it doesn't. So
He was pointing to his head, by
yes.
the way.
I was hoping that they'd pick.
Good. This is a audio medium.
Yes.
And so does that mean, Daniel, when you visualize a sequence, you're visualizing it edited together?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I actually struggle to do that.
You're very good at focusing on
Single shots. Yeah.
and knowing how each of them is
Yeah.
working.
So, think of that what you will.
I suppose you might say I think in terms of the edit of the film, so I just sort of know instinctively how to write a shot list. So if I do it by myself, it comes out a lot more unfiltered and probably a lot more slightly more ambitious. But in doing that, you sort of strive harder to get to the spot that you want to be at.
And I imagine, really important literacy to then become a second nature as you're breaking down the world around you, but via that technology of creating a film.
Yes,
right?
yes, exactly.
This will appear there. You see sometimes that kind of
people doing
cliche
the
of
little star
yes.
hand sign thing. Yeah,
and they'll be getting the aspect, I guess, or what's in shot and not in shot.
Yeah.
But you're doing it without having necessarily put
no, I don't
rectangle
really
in front
have
of
to
your
do
face.
that necessarily.
He just trusts that I've got it in shot.
Yeah.
Yes.
Actually, there is a piece of equipment that you might notice some directors have in behind the scenes footage. They'll have this necklace with this lens thing on it,
Yes.
and that's
yes.
basically so they can see
Right.
without having to set up the camera.
Right.
Yep.
And my equivalent of that is I just have the camera off the tripod and I just set up the shot with the camera vaguely, and then I go, yeah, that's good, and
Yep.
then I move everything in place and set it up there.
I suppose any interest in technology that I have is, wow, you can do that? That's cool. Like when we hooked the phone up to the camera, so now you don't actually have to look through the camera to see what's on it. And you can walk around and you can show people what the framing is without having to move the camera.
I guess you have to be open to the learning curve
Yeah.
that might be linked to that. It's like, okay, it looks great. I guess let's put into practice, see what works, doesn't work.
And again, this taps into a conversation we had a few weeks ago, or months ago now.
Probably would have been 2 months ago.
There's always going to be someone who's thought of that question and has come up with a solution for that. So you go, I can't afford a monitor. Every time I've tried to get a monitor, I've struggled with setting it up. So can you use your phone as a monitor? Yes, you can. What apps can I use? What free apps can I use? Oh,
What apps work with your camera?
yeah,
Yeah.
that's it, But we shouldn't get too into that topic because
Think
otherwise
things
we'll
are a
be...
Google away.
Yes.
Well, let's. I think it's a good way of showing that plumbing question in action in terms of if you were on set showing me that setup, how your mobile phone is used as a monitor, that's streaming the image from the camera that you're using, and it's just a free app that you've hooked up for it. It's amazing.
And there are limitations with that. The signal, if it's wireless, there's a lot of latency there, and there's a lot of if you move the monitor too far away, then it starts to the image starts to stutter. But for a nice, cheap, and easy way of doing it,
And just for
perfect.
someone to understand what the framing is.
Yeah.
Like-
Yeah. No. Okay. So,
Yes.
so this. So, this has been the bane of my filmmaking existence for so long. No, still in frame. Still in frame. Still in frame. Still in frame. No, you're out of frame. Oh, but if you just go up to the actor or whoever's got the sound or whatever, and you just show them an image of it, they can go, oh, and they can shuffle off a bit and go, oh, I'm out of
Yes.
frame, or I'm in frame.
Yep.
Much simpler.
Yeah.
But the question, so you raised the point of props. So this
Yeah.
got me thinking of that other clip I'll play, which is world building essentials for screenwriters. Because one of the other fun parts, I guess, of coming on that day was how you guys had created the idea of a little corporate interview piece or corporate puff piece that was being produced that I was
Yes.
acting in. And, there was discussion of, how are we going to set the lighting up for this and so forth.
Yes.
And then this kind of amusing moment, I think, where one of you were quipping that actually we can just set up anyway because it's meant to look crappy. It's meant to look kind of...
It's meant to go in the canon of the, I guess, bit. It's
Yes.
supposed to go wrong.
Yeah, it's supposed to be one of those things where you've clearly got people that know what they're doing, and they've set it up properly, and then inexplicably it all goes wrong because someone didn't communicate something to someone.
In my head, I've sort of concocted this idea that in that scene, you were supposed to not walk around the room, but you took the initiative to walk around the room and they had to follow you.
And suddenly this nicely set up shot
Yeah.
is no longer nicely set up because I'm moving out of the shot and the cameraman has to do this kind of,
Detach
handheld
it. Yeah,
kind
detach
of,
the camera from
okay.
the tripod, and that looks like it looks so messy. And
Because it is a fun question when you're brought on. I mean, I'm not an actor, so it was
You aren't?
nice.
Like, you could have fooled me.
Thank you. It was nice to be told, all right, it's meant to look kind of like a bit of a train wreck,
Yeah.
and those kind of points of guidance are just really helpful to get into the type of performance you're doing. So, okay, let's listen to a little bit of this guy setting up what this idea of world building is, because I guess what we're talking about here is how on set everything's deliberate,
Yes.
right? I mean, when you're looking back on this scene that we filmed, you might think, gee, why did they choose that or that? And as you're answering that question, it's like, well, they deliberately, like, it's not an accident.
No.
That this was done that way. All right, so let's listen firstly. This is an interview with Steve Douglas Craig, who works at Sony Pictures Entertainment as the editor and acquisitions executive for Worldwide Acquisitions team. Wow, it's one of those plumbing jobs.
Hey, could you please repeat that for me?
He's have a number of titles underneath his name on his name card. Anyway, all right, well, let's just jump in. I'm sure it will make more sense once we listen to him.
What does world building mean to you?
It means Star Wars.
Which is a classic answer, right? What does world building mean?
Star Wars.
Star Wars, right? And many people do point to Star Wars as a great example, particularly the cantina scene as world building, right? So in that first Star Wars movie, it's you know you're in a different world, not because it's told to you necessarily. I mean, you do have
you
that.
can see the sort of vibrant, multicultural alien.
That's right.
Rabble.
There's these wonderful shots Lucas stars going from table to table of all these, absurdly, made up alien creatures, and just with no dialogue, you get the sense of, wow, this is a really kind of multicultural, multi-species galaxy.
And then you get the Empire, and they're all the same.
The same. Yeah.
They're all the same.
Yeah.
And they're all human.
So let's see how he breaks down this idea of why Star Wars is a good example. Because in a way, the we were doing the cantina scene in a different sense on set in that way. Instead of having aliens, it was each student.
And
I
they
knew
all
was
sort of
different.
populated the room with their own sort of style.
Yeah.
And yeah, no,
All right.
sure.
It means setting your main point of view or your character in the world. And I think when you look at sci-fi and fantasy, a lot of horror, period pieces, that becomes an essential part of creating the tone and the feeling of what you're trying to convey. So if you're setting something in a period, if you don't get that right, the read can be and the film is not going to work. So I think world building is, very much about the creating of the setting. And for me, the setting is a character in itself, in that, if you want to set, an exorcism, for instance, where would you set that? Well, let's set it in a church. There's a contrast there. Or let's set it in a school playground, somewhere.
Wow, I like this. The character. So the setting,
Yes,
the location is a character.
I've heard
in
that
itself.
that idiom quite often. So,
Do you feel you've come across any characters in some of the settings and world building you've done on this piece?
on this one, let me have a little think.
I mean, I guess the school that we did the
Yes.
Yeah. It's more.
I think we will, but we haven't gotten to those parts yet.
because looking right in the edits.
It's more practicality and logistics and coming up against reality and having those sorts of limitations.
That being said, like, you can get a lot of character out of something.
Yeah.
Like that room that we filmed your scene in, I didn't know that existed.
How did you
Because we
get to it?
we
I mean-
didn't get a tour of the campus before we went there. And when we went there, I was like, well, the first order of business is to find where we're filming, because we haven't established that yet.
No, the first order of business was to get the alarm to stop ringing.
Because somebody, because the people of the powers that be had not turned the power off like they were supposed to, and so the alarms went off.
Yeah, the doors were on. And again, this is one of those crazy things that can hit you in the reality of going on location to a spot. I mean, you'd lined it up, you'd done everything in accordance with protocol, contacted someone that allowed you to use the school facilities to do this film shoot in. Fantastic, it's going to be on a Sunday. But then you get there and you're thinking, okay, well, here's the main door. I guess we'll open it. Was there a moment of hesitation of thinking,
Oh, no, because I just sort of trusted the system, I guess. I was like, oh, surely this is all working. I put the key in and I just opened it and I was like, oh, well.
And then a very loud alarm, I'd imagine.
Oh, it was awful. Mind you, I don't think anybody was too concerned.
There weren't any citizen arrests
No,
made?
I thought it was hilarious.
No, like we both thought it was quite amusing. We were like, here we go.
And I don't want to toot my own horn, but I believe that had we reacted differently, had Daniel and I started panicking, everyone else would have started panicking.
Well, because all you can do is to get the person with the contact to make the contacts again, just to make sure that we're in the good zone.
Yeah.
And to solve the problem. And so when when it happened, I just said to Eiley, oh, do you reckon you could call the people just to let them know this has happened?
And she was already on that.
And she was already doing it, so that was fine.
Yeah. Eiley, great talent. Well done, Eiley.
About 3 minutes later, the alarms are off. Very good. They were very apologetic that I hadn't turned them off for us.
And so when you did set up, were you kind of thinking, okay, I hadn't been able to get on site to see this, but we can make this work. This will be in a way, a character.
Yeah, I sort of had to explore the building for a bit and go, this, and this. Pretty snappy decision making, I suppose. And then I walked off to the other end of the school and I saw this big open classroom with lockers in the background, and I was like, oh, this is a big space. We can set up anything in here. And it wasn't quite the scene that I'd imagined. In my head, the scene had rows of desks. Whereas in the scene that we ended up shooting, there was bigger desks with students crowded around each desk, and there was about 4 desks, I think it was. And in the end, that kind of made it better, because then...
It's more awkward.
More awkward, even. Like, it would have been so strangely dystopian for you to walk through rows of desks, as opposed to what you did do, which is a bit more fluid and interesting.
Yes.
But when I was like, yep, no, we'll use this. And I didn't think too much about moving things right now, because that's later. And I'm sure we'd get to it quickly. But when we did get to that room, I was like, excellent, we're here. And so our lighting person, she said to me, so where are we putting all the lights? And I went, very good question. And at the first when she asked that, I was pretty like, yeah, that's a very good question. Where would they go in relation to the rest of it? And then I said, well, this is supposed to be a commercial within this movie that is poorly made. Well, not necessarily poorly made on our behalf, but in the canon of the film, it's an awful advertisement. And I sort of thought, well, if the lights are in the background of all these shots, it kind of doesn't matter, because this kind of goes off the rails anyway.
And I suppose that does turn the space into a character.
Yeah.
Because it establishes that it's meant to go wrong. If that makes sense. Well, I mean, I'm just trying to articulate what's going on in my mind, because
I think
because there's a lot of elements in there that help sell the story.
Yes.
So that the lights being in all those awkward positions.
And in that case, it's sort of like this accidental, you're stumbling into this situation where it's just perfect. Oh, excellent. Very good.
And it brings back to the point, I guess, he's making about, if you're filming an exorcism, where would you do that? Well, you could do it in a church, which would be a complementary space, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's religious, so that doubles down.
Whereas
on that
playground is a really cool contrast.
Yeah.
And I like contrasts.
Or you go with the classic in the bedroom. They've been sort of sequestered away and hidden away from society by their family. They're embarrassed and ashamed of them, and that's all. That's established.
Is telling a story. Yeah.
That's established by them being in a bedroom.
Yeah. Exactly.
So yeah, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot to get out of where you film something, regardless of what it is, I suppose. Like, there's a relationship between the space and the content. And I suppose in this case, the relationship is that it is where it's supposed to be.
in a school setting.
In a school setting.
With desks.
With desks, and it's kind of set up in this weird way where your character kind of alludes to the idea that these students were collected for this, like it was an experiment.
Yeah.
And that they're all sort of non-committal to the process, and it's all just very awkward and bizarre.
I suppose.
Yes.
I suppose the question is, was there a conscious decision made to turn a space into a character, or did it just happen organically?
I think it always happens organically,
Yeah.
just
Well, I mean-
because that's just the nature of things and semiotics, I suppose.
Because like in the cantina scene, that a lot of planning went into that, and so it was a very conscious decision to have everything how it was.
Yeah.
Whereas for us, we're just like, yeah, this is good.
Yep.
It
Pretty
works.
And not that there's no planning, I suppose, but there's more to be stated in, say, something like the cantina, where it's like there's this intention to create a sort of what's the word? A verisimilitude.
Yes.
For the audience to buy into.
But, you know, again, I think you could imagine that suspension of disbelief being threatened if it was, you know, so you're meant to be talking with students. If they were not kind of portraying studentness enough. Right, unless that was the kind of satire.
Which is quite funny because originally the character I was playing in that scene was supposed to be played by Peter G, who is old man.
Yes.
So, and that was supposed to be a kind of satire of a mature age student, and he's a very mature age student.
Well, yes.
But it ended up being me putting on a funny voice and kind of pretending to be an old man, which is I think equally as funny.
Look, and I do think that's an interesting moment where you think, do you lean into the stereotype or do you pull back from it?
Yep.
Right. So even when I was thinking, okay, what clothes shall I choose? I thought, well, I'm just going to lean into a stereotype of. So I chose a turtleneck, black turtleneck, because I'm thinking, you know, that is such a cliche kind of lecturer, philosopher.
You looked very TED Talk.
That's it, TED
That's
Talk kind of iPhone launch vibe, and then one of those kind of, you know, modestly thread. You know, what is it? That kind of cord jacket.
Yep.
But very, very modest chords. And my wife, I was just going to wear a baseball cap, and my wife said, no. Put that golf cap on.
Yeah.
Yes. No, I think that
thinking,
cap actually kind of
really?
made the costume.
It's not too
actually.
much. It's like, oh, do the golf cap.
Your performance in that, Craig, was
okay.
It was something else. I mean,
I particularly liked
very nice.
the way that you sort of reacted to the other
your
actors.
Your
improv was very
fantastic.
good. Especially when you had to react to just being glared at by someone eating an apple that we couldn't see. Like, the camera can't see her because she's obscured by books, but you can just feel her rage.
Yes.
And you were the only person who got to see it.
Yes.
But without words, purely through your acting, what I got from that scene was a university lecturer who'd been beaten down by the system, thrown to the wolves,
and sort of in the deep end about what he's supposed to do in this scenario.
Forced to do this dumb HR experiment. You know, look how fantastic we are. Look at all these wonderful students, and when it went wrong, you didn't fight it. You just sort of accepted it as another thing that happens at these places. That you go, right, well, I give up. I don't care anymore. You know?
Well, it was an easy
and he
role,
just rolls with it.
Yeah,
just
he
rolls with it.
And I think part of it was the way that, again, that world building idea of just giving the scene permission to be messy and bad. And once you're realizing, well, you know, I don't need to be good. It's basically liberating, again, therapeutic.
Yeah.
And another thing about the deterioration of your character is that it sort of brings into question, was he always on board with this? or was he putting on a show for the camera at the beginning? Fantastic. Again,
Well,
none of this was in the script. None of this is in the dialogue. All of this is in how you perform.
Yeah, 100%.
So, I know that's not going off.
Mind you, like the prompts are in
Yeah,
the script,
yeah,
I
well,
guess,
yeah, yeah.
but like, and the dialogue is there, but how you act upon those prompts and that dialogue is even more important, because it's sort of that is what creates the cinema, I
Yes.
suppose.
And when I read the script, this is not the scene that I had in my mind.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting question, isn't it? That what because the script was really nice, and it gave me a very clear idea of 5 students, I think it was,
Yeah,
that
5.
have been brought together. But it is interesting adapting from one medium to another medium. So going from print, where, as you're saying, if you've got a vivid imagination, you might be having quite a rich world that leaves you your mind in. But you might not, in which case it's kind of a bit flat and grey.
Yeah.
And so then it's interesting trying to adapt that into a very different medium of visual performance with real people.
I suppose on that, what I'm finding, before I forget about this, particularly rewarding about this project is that because I'm acting upon my vivid imagination, I am actually seeing the things that are in my head, and that's very gratifying. And when it isn't exactly it, it's usually better.
Right.
Like in this instance with this scene that you're in, I mentioned that originally in my mind it was rows of desks,
Yes.
but how it ended up was more amusing, and now that is the definitive version in my head. So it's replaced whatever was there before, but the way it flowed and the way it was paced and how it was performed was essentially what was in my mind. It's just that I guess the particular visual of it is different, which is interesting, I suppose.
Yeah, and again, it's such a unique experience to go through, that idea of I guess you could the cliche of being giving birth to that process.
Yeah.
All those kind of transformations and emotions you experience. Very interesting. Well, let's jump in and hear where else. Well, actually, would you guys like to further embellish the idea of world building or plumbing?
Oh, that's a very good question.
Do we have time?
We've got
15 minutes.
15 minutes left, so we can certainly jump off from either one of these into some more depth.
I reckon we can spend another like 5 minutes on world building and
building?
then sort of go back to plumbing.
Well, let's have a little listen to the next clip and see how he sets up that idea again of contrast or complementing world building.
Where it can be explosive, and it can have a say in what world that we're trying to convey. I think that's also a common thing that I see in the beginning of scripts when I'm looking at, is this a good script or not? Does the writer understand the world that they're in? Do they understand how important the world is and the effect it's supposed to have on the character's trajectory, out into a new world?
Daniel, what did you think about that? I mean, because I guess the first experience anyone you're going to invite onto a project has is the script. So when you send that script out, do you often find that, people get it pretty quickly?
In this case, people seemed to get it quite nicely. I think that's potentially because it's just it explains itself quite well. It's not incredibly vague. And the whole script in its entirety is quite I guess it's an easy story to understand.
Is it a kind of a coming of age piece or a kind of generation clash?
A generation clash between not that wide a generation gap, I suppose. That kind of almost I suppose, to use more concrete language, probably like a millennial and a Gen Z clash, I suppose. But it could apply to any 8-year age gap in your 20s, I suppose, in any time.
Yes.
That isn't necessarily today, I suppose. Because the movie is sort of about how a 20-year-old and a 28-year-old differ, and how that sort of creates conflict and camaraderie in the end, I suppose. And people got that pretty well. as for how the world in the script sort of informs all of that, I suppose you've got, dreary office buildings that kind of heightens this guy's life is sort of in shambles. His house is messy and a bit like he doesn't sort of care very much about what's going on, and that gives you that informs you of what the character's internal world might be like. He's got a messy house. He's probably got a messy mind.
Yes.
Whereas, say, the younger character clearly in the script never says that he lives with his parents, but you can tell because the house that he's in is like, it just looks like somewhere that a married couple lives, and it gives off a certain energy or a vibe that makes you infer things about the character that aren't necessarily told to you.
But it's certainly a script that knows what it is.
Yes, exactly.
And yes, because of that, you can infer quite a lot.
Yeah,
exactly. It's easy to see those leaps of logic.
I think because I was acting in a scene. I've got a brief moment in this movie, and the props were coming out, and I hadn't fully realized it in my head that these props were going to have such a huge impact on the dynamic of, or not the dynamic, the sort of help me out here, Daniel. The aesthetic,
the
mise en scène.
Yes, that. But also, are you sort of thinking about the way you're interacting with the scene? Yes. Yep.
See, this is something that I struggle with, right? Is the details of a set being something that can be used. So, I did do a decent job, I think, of going, oh, well, my character can show dominance over this other character by picking up
using the scene
and picking up one of his toys and threatening him with it. Not threatening, but just sort of laissez, sort of.
I suppose to be more specific, it's like he's the main character's supervisor.
Yes,
right.
And he comes over to sort of toxically guilt him into working on the weekend.
Yes,
yes.
And he kind of and one of the props in the scene on this desk, because the character. Well, it's just another setting thing, I guess, is that another more world-building thing is that this character, the main character, loves knickknacks.
Yeah.
And he just has stuff everywhere. And so he's got cars and toy guns on his desk and a random lightsaber that he hits his desk with at one point, and darts that he's just got there.
And
so when you come over
right.
to sort of to increase that sort of power dynamic, he picks up one of the toy guns and starts playing with it while he's really delivering his sort of thesis on that moment.
And I think I do a good job of that. But I didn't incorporate the fact that I had allowed one of my underlings to clutter his workspace with all this, in my character's mind, crap. I hadn't really sort of internalized that and gone, how do I use this in the performance? It was just I can use this gun to threaten him with it.
And there's meaning in that. Like twirling a gun around while you're talking to somebody has a kind of aesthetic vibe to it.
Very complimentary again.
But there could have been more sort of contempt and disgust for why he's got all this stuff,
which interesting creates discussion amongst everybody who's there as why does he have all these things on his desk and why do they allow this? Which creates funny headcanon moments. We go, well, he just has them because he's really good. He actually is really good at his job, and they just let him get away with it.
Yeah, and they don't audit him because he does his job well. Just don't question it. Don't.
Maybe they think he's crazy and will pull a gun on them. Who knows?
Yeah, just let him go. Let him be. But the point is that I didn't internalize that at the time, and so I can definitely improve on that in the future.
But again, I could see how the props combine nicely with the script.
Yeah.
and
the setting and whatever
Yeah.
whatever we're filming.
But
that
my
sort of stuff.
performance suffered because I didn't internalize it.
well, maybe I think you're being way too harsh on yourself. I'm sure.
I actually have a comment to make about that
Yeah.
line of thinking.
Yep. Ooh.
I actually think that not internalizing the quote-unquote logic of that is actually a boon, because it lets you focus on the thematic relevance of why you're doing these things on a subtextual level.
Oh, this could turn into a whole discussion.
If you focus too much on what makes sense necessarily, you're going to miss the opportunity to do cool things that make sense on a deeper level.
It's almost a very mindful moment.
Yes,
right?
it is.
To allow
Yeah.
yourself to, like, there's something they say about the script, right? Like you learn, memorize, do the script, and then there'll be those interviews with actors, and
Yeah.
they'll say, so we did like 6 takes from the script, and then Robin Williams will often talk about this moment in the film. Like they'll say he'll deliver it 6 times perfectly, and then they'll give him 1 or 2 improvised
Yeah.
scenes. Sometimes they'll use those, sometimes they won't.
Yeah.
Allegedly, there's some film, like a PG one he did, where the improvised scenes basically turn it into an R-rated film.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Yeah,
And people
right.
have been pleading for this
that
R-rated cut,
Yeah.
right? All of Robin Williams's unreleased cuts from, I forget which film it was, but anyway,
Aladdin.
And
I think it might have been Aladdin.
yeah. I think you're
But,
right. I think you're right.
And all that said, that's not to say that someone pointing out some logical inconsistencies is a bad thing, because that can sometimes work wonders. Because I was location scouting with somebody for a park that we could use for one of the scenes at the very end, and he sort of said, "Oh, in the script," because he's the lead actor, he goes, "Well, in the script it kind of comes across more like it's a camping ground, like a out there kind of place." And I for reasons of for artsy reasons wanted to use a swing set in this scene.
And I suppose.
And
sorry.
that sort of, and him going, "Oh, well, so why are we using a park?" And initially I was like, "Oh, that question doesn't matter." But then I thought about it for about 30 seconds, and I was like, "Wait a minute, this actually kind of this could tie in quite well with the movie, because you could say that they've come to this park. It's not what they expected. It's changed from the last time they were here, and that's relevant to the point of the film, and it
Yes.
makes it more poignant."
I suppose what I'm getting from this conversation, or did you have more?
No,
to
no,
add?
go for it.
I suppose what I'm getting from this conversation is that intentionality versus happenstance. It's not very useful to go, "Oh no, you have to be 100% intentional," or
I think,
or 100%. Oh well, we'll see what happens when we get there.
I tend to be very intentional
Yeah.
about things, but I think that and I could go on about this kind of thing for hours, but I think that people overvalue planning in their writing pursuits,
Particularly if it
and-
comes at the expense of improv.
and I think that's not so much something that writers overvalue, but it's it's the consumer who overvalues that, and so they look for planning as did they plan for that?
Why were the curtains blue?
No,
What?
no, not even that.
Yeah.
But it's like what I'm talking about is
Yeah.
was that foreshadowed, or was that just like he left breadcrumbs for himself and picked it up later?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
I sort of go, people like to claim that 100% intentionality means 100%. That's the better way to go. But I think it's more interesting if you can really see that an author has left themselves something and then picked it up later and used it for not necessarily what they would have thought, or even they might not have even had an idea, but they take it somewhere and it looks like it was like that all along, I suppose.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. It can be fascinating hearing about film projects later,
Mhm.
and something that's become quite a significant part of the film was only,
Yeah.
accidentally included. It was like Twin Peaks, the famous scene where I think it was one of the gaffers or something, or one of the set assistants was stuck in shot.
Yeah.
But thought he was out of shot,
Yeah.
and it was the bedroom scene when the mother goes up after Laura's died. And anyway, and then they were going over the shots, and they realized that he's in shot, and it was going to be a real headache. But then they decided, we'll keep it in, because this is that
It's supposed
emergence
to be
of
weird.
this supernatural
Yeah.
Bob Killer character.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We are nearly at time.
Oh.
I know, because it does feel that Ed, you've got
I just
last point.
I just wonder how many interviews with directors and such, they just go, yeah, oh yeah, it was 100% intentional. Yes, we meant to do that. And I wonder if that's the case, and then if that's just sort of created this perception.
Well, I mean, like, there is different styles. I mean, you can put somebody on a sort of on a scale of 1 to 10 about how intentional someone is. Like, someone could be totally maverick about it and just make up things on the fly, and it just totally works. But you've got to sort of balance that with that intentionality with being able to improvise and take what you've already got and make it work.
Tommy was comes across as being highly intentional.
Oh yes,
but that doesn't necessarily the room.
Yes.
Yeah, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best thing ever made, because it's just, oh well, maybe he vampire or spoons. It's a symbolic meaning, and you go, why are there spoons in these frames? It's just.
Well, it was because they bought them that day from the shop and just kept them in there.
But. But like, but maybe he vampire. Maybe American football is. It just seems like it's intentional, but it just doesn't add anything to the story.
Well, actually, I there was a quote that somebody said to me quite a long time ago, and it was, "There is no such thing as thoughtlessness in creative pursuits. There is only stupid thoughts."
Yeah, there's no bad ideas sometimes.
Well, more so that it's not that no one's never thinking about it. So if you accuse something of being thoughtless, it's usually more that it was a bad thought. I think it's strange to conject that a creative person didn't think about what they were doing. That's just what they do. That's just what they're doing. But what was I going to say? Something to do with that. Oh, I've lost it.
Oh, it's so sad. Well, we are at time, but we'll have to see how this thoughtfulness continues and how the project then emerges. So if people want to find out more about this, where can they go?
Oh, you can go
any
to
space.
You can go to 3 different places actually.
Yes.
You can go to my Facebook, Daniel Brooks,
Brooks
with no E, so BROOKS, or you can go to the Big Love Studios Instagram, which someone helped me make a week ago.
Oh, great!
So that exists now.
So that's Big Love.
Big_love_studios.
Studios. All right, so hit those up on.
And we also have a TikTok.
Instagram. Wow.
Yeah, we have a TikTok. That is it's good.
It's also Big Love.
Big Love Studios, yeah.
Excellent. Well, Daniel and Edward, thank you so much for coming on Media Mothership this week. Doesn't look like K-pop will be playing, unless I could just sing K-pop music, which I can't.
Oh.
So keep listening to some Edge Radio tunes. Media Motherships will be back next Friday, and we've got Can't Sit Down with Adrian after this. Thanks again, Edward and Daniel.
Well, see you, everybody.
Thank you. You can come out of the camera now.
The true sounds of Tasmania on Edge Radio 99.3 FM.